Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time for my annual video in which I combine each of Europe's traditional top 5 leagues into one mega league. What I mean by that specifically is that I'm bringing together all 98 teams from the 2022-23 season in the Premier League, Liga, Serie A, Bundesliga and La Liga, and ordering them from highest to lowest based on how many points per game they accrued over the course of the previous campaign. In order to make this experiment as fair as possible, I have to use a points per game system rather than just taking each team's overall points totals, since the Bundesliga sides play 34 games compared to the other 4 leagues' teams playing 38 respectively, although Ligue 1 is set to reduce to 34 games from 38 as of next season. If there are any ties, the teams in question will be separated by goal difference, and if they still can't be split, then goals scored will be the deciding factor, which does happen once, so stay tuned for that. I will also provide you with information on how much better, or indeed how much worse, each team did compared to last season, although each newly promoted team, i.e. those that were promoted in 2021-22, will have the word new next to their name. I've made this type of video for each of the last 3 seasons, so if you want to check any of those out for added context, I'll make sure to stick links to the ones I made for the 2021-22 and 2020-21 seasons on the end screen of this video. But please don't watch the one for the 2019-20 season. It's terrible. As I do every year, I'll start at the top and work my way down, since I think it's more interesting to see which teams had worse seasons than those who had good ones, as they'll be much easier to guess. And of course, if you enjoy this video and enjoy this experiment as a whole, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So here is the table, and as you can see, your 2022-23 champions are Napoli. The Neapolitans just about managed to edge out Premier League champions, and indeed the reigning Super League champions, for want of a better term, Manchester City by 0.03 points per game, meaning that they can add this trophy to the presumably much less prestigious honour of their first Serie A crown in 33 years. Fellow title winners Barcelona and PSG come in 3rd and 4th respectively, but surprisingly they aren't followed by Bundesliga champions Bayern. Instead, Premier League runners-up Arsenal and Ligue 1 surprise package Lens both find themselves ahead of the Bavarians, whose points per game haul of 2.09 is the lowest, by a considerable margin no less, of any title winner over the last 4 years. Rounding out the top 10 are Bundesliga bottle jobbers Borussia Dortmund, last season's La Liga champions Real Madrid, and their Madrid neighbours, Atletico. The rest of the top 20 see some of Europe's biggest clubs take their places, including Manchester United, who rose 25 places from last year, Internazionale, Marseille, and last season's Serie A winners AC Milan, who are the biggest fallers among the top 20, having dropped from 6th to 18th. However, the team with the biggest improvements among Europe's elite this season is undoubtedly Newcastle United. The Magpies, spearheaded by Eddie Howe and a lot of Saudi money, have shot up from 50th last year to 16th this time around, and their outstanding season has been rewarded with a first Champions League campaign to look forward to since 2002-03. Union Berlin also shook up the establishment to earn their first Champions League qualification in their history in just their 4th top flight campaign, and their reward in the context of this particular league is a placement of 19th. I was also quite surprised to see that 3 teams maintained their positions from last year, namely PSG, Rennes and Marseille. All French teams coincidentally, especially since Real Madrid were the only team out of the 98 last year to stay in the exact same spot as the year prior. Moving on to the brackets containing the teams who placed in 21st to 40th, we have a true smorgasbord of European behemoths and lesser known teams all fighting against each other. Belonging to the former category include the likes of Liverpool, who came in 2nd in this league last year but had an immense drop off in standards to slump down to 21st, Europa League finalists Roma, 36 times Serie A winners Juventus, albeit they were deducted 10 points owing to their shady transfer dealings, which brought them down multiple spots, and Lyon. In the latter category, you have Brighton, who find themselves sandwiched in between Juventus and Lyon after a barnstorming season, which saw them qualify for the Europa League for the first time in their history, Clermont Foot, who are the league's biggest risers this season, having jumped up from 84th last year to 35th this, and Freiburg, who continue to punch well above their weight in the Bundesliga. Lorient, Aston Villa and Brentford all enjoyed massive leaps up the table too, rising 42, 32 and 27 places respectively. Meanwhile, Spurs' wretched season sees them slip 19 places to 32nd, and despite a renaissance under Xabi Alonso, Bayer Leverkusen's miserable start to the campaign meant they missed out on European football completely and, more personally in the context of this particular league, fell to 38th. The bracket of 41st to 60th still has a couple of historically successful teams, and thus currently underachieving teams, in there, perhaps most notably of all, Europa League winners Sevilla. They endured a terrible first two-thirds of the campaign or so, only turning their fortunes around with the appointment of Jose Luis Mendilibar as their manager, but it was only enough to see them limp into 53rd, a whopping 37 places lower than last year. Mind you, after winning the Europa League, they get Champions League football next year, so I don't think they mind too much. Wolfsburg, Torino, Athletic Bilbao and Borussia Mönchengladbach are perhaps the other big names in this particular bracket, all of them experiencing relatively mediocre campaigns once again. We also have the first four of the 14 newly promoted teams in Fulham, Monza, Girona and Toulouse, with the Cottagers the highest place out of all of them, narrowly finishing ahead of Silvio Berlusconi's Monza on goal difference. As we approach the lower stages of this particular league, Liga and Serie A have both had 13 clubs represented, the Premier League and Bundesliga 11 and La Liga 12. So at this point in time, it's looking likely that Liga and Serie A will be the first to strike out, and the Premier League and the Bundesliga might be last. You might have assumed that Sevilla plummeting 37 places from last year would be the worst out of any team in this league, but you would be wrong. Instead, that dishonour goes to the team who finished in 61st. Namely Chelsea. The Blues' embarrassment of a campaign, which saw them spend £600 million on players, tying them down to stupidly long contracts, and £60 million at the very minimum to 3 managers when one factors in wagings, hirings from other clubs, and severance payments after 2 of them were sacked, meant that instead of winning the league as Todd Bowley might have expected, they've ended up in 12th in the Premier League and 61st here, some 51 places lower than last year. In fact, only Sheffield United in 2020-21 have experienced a worse drop-off in fortunes compared to the previous season than Chelsea this time around, when they fell 54 places after a dismal second season back in the Premier League. Chelsea only managed to finish above Stade Brest on goal difference alone and narrowly ahead of Empoli and Salernitana, 2 relative minnows of the Italian game. Truly abysmal. Away from Chelsea, other big fall-offs include Strasbourg and West Ham, who sank 47 and 37 places respectively, although the Hammers do have a Europa Conference League final against Fiorentina on the day that this video is uploaded, so their season could well be salvaged should they emerge victorious. Also within this bracket is the most unfortunate team of all, Real Valladolid, who, despite amassing 40 points and 1.05 points per game, level with West Ham and Strasbourg no less, still succumbed to relegation in La Liga. Therefore, as far as I can recall at the very least, they are the team with the most points per game and the highest placed side to ever be relegated in each of the 4 seasons that I've done this, and they finished above 8 teams who managed to survive the drop in their respective leagues, and that will become 9 once the Serie A relegation playoff has been played. All of this means that there are just 2 teams left from La Liga to feature compared to 4 from England, 5 from Ligue and from Serie A as well, and 2 from the Bundesliga, as we go into positions 81st to 90th. This bracket is mostly made up of teams who weren't able to avoid the threat of relegation, perhaps most significantly of all, Leicester, who are playing in the Europa League in 2021-22 and of course won the Premier League in 2016, but will now find themselves slumming it out in the Championship next season after having dropped by 45 places compared to last year. Nantes, Lecce and Everton are the only teams in this bracket who are guaranteed to be a part of this experiment next year, with the first of those 3 teams experiencing a similar fall-off to Leicester of 45 spots. But the Bundesliga are the first league to strike out completely, as their basement team Hertha Berlin come in 88th, meaning that they are the only one of the 5 leagues featured not to have a team in the bottom 10. A stark improvement on years prior, given the Bundesliga teams propped up this Super League experiment in 2020-21 and 2021-22. Now we move into 91st to 95th. I always save the bottom 3 teams until the very end, and Spezia are the lowest placed team who still haven't been officially relegated yet, although they will contest a relegation playoff with Hellas Verona, whom they finished level on points with in Serie A, this coming Saturday. La Liga and the Premier League also see their last representatives in the forms of Elche and Southampton, who, coincidentally enough, also bring us our only exact tie on points per game and goal difference. But since the Saints scored 36 goals compared to Elche's tally of 30, they finish above the Spaniards. Not like they'll care much about it, in fairness. And so we come to the bottom three teams, namely Angers, Troyes and Sampdoria. 2 from France and 1 from Italy. Who takes the wooden spoon this year, following in the esteemed company of Toulouse, Schalke and Greuther Fürth? Well, it's Angers, with a joint lowest second points per game out of any team over the last 4 seasons, with a measly 0.47. Sampdoria's crisis campaign saw them end on 0.5 points per game, but also with a very real threat of going out of business altogether unless a prospective buyer can be found, which at this moment in time seems to be Leeds owner Andrea Radriazzani, and Troyes, who are owned by the City Football Group, who are Manchester City among many other clubs, couldn't take inspiration from the Blues' successes this season and ended up just 2 places above the very bottom of this league and only spared from last place in Ligue by Angers' dismal season. Given that, as mentioned earlier, Ligue will decrease in size to 18 teams as of next year, Angers will forever hold the distinction of being the final team to come in 98th place in this Super League, and by extension, Sampdoria the last to finish in 97th. As only 96 teams will be a part of next year's experiment. And that just wraps up today's video on this Super League experiment, when you combine each of Europe's top 5 leagues into one for the 2022-23 season, ranking each of the teams on a points per game basis. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and check out the videos I did for the 2021-22 season here and the 2020-21 season here. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.